Afternoon. My name is Roberto Martinez-Maldonado from University of Technology of Sydney, and I'm going to present our work, our first attempt to bring learn analytics into a simulation healthcare education classroom. So I'm going to present this in behalf of our team, which was quite interdisciplinary, with of course some learn analytics researchers, but also experts in simulation education in the field of healthcare, and technicians that know how to use these devices. So first of all, this research is in line of these new attempts to bring technologies into the classroom, technologies that sometimes can sense different activity of the students, and they are becoming little by little more common to different extents. In this particular case, we are talking about clinical simulation, where in different hospitals and universities, they started using these mannequins that simulate a patient. And this offers a safe environment for nurses or doctors and other practitioners to actually practice before they go to the workplace. So this is safe for the patient and safe for also the practitioners, the students. In the universities, there are different degrees of mannequins with different degree of fidelity. So some very high fidelity mannequins can capture pretty much all the actions that are performed by the students on them, like sensing pressure or giving some medications. And they can be programmed by the tutors or the trainers or the teachers to deteriorate and even present adverse reactions to drugs, and then students need to actually perform some actions to revive the patient. And in other schools, there are other mannequins that are very low fidelity, that they don't offer that much data for us to explore. So in this case, we are using those mannequins because they are in the classrooms, because it's easier for the schools to use them, although we are also exploring the other kind of mannequins. So this is the environment, this is the kind of classroom. The classroom simulates also a room in a hospital when there are multiple beds, and in each bed there is a patient. So the nurses come to these sometimes long sessions, around 3 hours, and they do simulations as if they would be in the hospital. So they need to engage with the patient at certain times and have different roles. So the problem here is that these patients don't offer that many logs, and we don't know what happens beyond the patient, beyond what it can be captured by the mannequins. So we enhance a little bit the environment by adding a depth sensor to know the positioning of the students around the patient. And also we added microphone array to also have some clue about if it's not the conversation, at least the noise that is happening around the beds. This particular model of mannequins also offer a sort of tablet device that the teacher usually use for the students to have a checklist of all these things that they need to do on the patient. So we got all these different kind of data, and we run some studies totally in the wild, because this is when the students come to the class regularly, they do these simulations. And well, in this case, we didn't attach anything, although that can be a possibility in the future. So in this case, it's not intrusive, besides the little devices that we added there. So this is pretty much how it looks like when a group of students are interacting with the mannequin. In this case, is a moment where the teacher is showing them some procedure. And in that right corner, we can see what the depth camera can see. You can see some users there, and can identify bodies. So that's pretty much part of what the computer can see, plus the other information that we can capture. So the purpose of this paper, this short paper, is focused on identifying the challenges of trying to bring this learn analytics into the wild. And At the same time, we attempt to make some progress to show the potential that analytics can bring in these kinds of scenarios. So the pilot study was formed by intervening in 5 classes, or observing 5 classes, and we recorded information from 2 beds in each of them. So we had 10 groups, actually a bit more, but these are the ones that we focus on. And there were 4 different teachers as well enacting in the different classes. So this was a regular classroom scenario. So one of the first attempts of trying to make sense of the data we collected is looking at the physicality of the movements of the students around the beds. So this is one example of one group. We took the data and we divided in quartiles to see the temporality of the movements. And for example, we could see that in this group there is some sort of embodied strategy where the students didn't engage directly with the mannequin in the first half of the activity, and it was until the third quartile, when they actually went to the mannequin and did something. In another group, we can see quite the opposite. They went directly to the mannequin, and then eventually they came back to this base of the bed. The importance for this particular scenario of the physicality is that if the student is next to the patient, obviously maybe is doing something with the patient, either interacting with him or her, or with the other nurses. And the base of the bed is the place where the nurses usually do the handover, so there is a meaning in being there. There's documents, they need to fill information, so it's task related. There's an epistemic meaning in the positioning. So this pretty much was like for 1 hour. And the heat maps also gave us information about what one group actually finished earlier for one or another reason. One of the main challenges that emerged initially here, it was identifying people around the bed. As you can see here, in the heat maps, we are not identifying who is who, even when we try. And there are many reasons for that. We are using a vision system, so they have imposed limitations. For example, here, this is a group of actually 4 people. That's the teacher. But for the system, the system doesn't know that this is the teacher. And the 4th member of the team is in another room because that's part of the task. They need to go and pick up some equipment. So this is one of the first challenges that we need to attack for the next iteration of the project. User identification in physical environments is quite tricky, and we have explored that in other scenarios as well. Then we attempted to overlap information. Like in this case, we overlap the directional audio signals with the heat maps of mobility. And in this case, it's just for the whole hour. We can maybe have more meaning if we distill it along the time. But in this case, it's just to have an overview that although most of the activity physical activity occur in the base of the bed, most of the conversation happen either on one side of the bed. While in another group, in group B, we can see even higher levels of conversation or audio received. So again, we need to explore more about trying to find patterns that can have some meaning. But the challenge here as well is the classroom noise. So this is a real classroom messy scenario where the conversation patterns, if it would be just one group in one class in a laboratory, we could have perfect data knowing directions, and we could track position of people and match. In this case, this is pretty much attempt to bring that matching of information. Another related challenge in the classroom are some simple things that we can sometimes ignore, that are unforeseen events of the classroom that can occur in any classroom. That, for example, people arriving late. And how does that affect everything? Well, it affects, first it affects the learning task and the teacher orchestration. In this case, we come back to this group. You see there are lots of students. It's actually one missing there, is not in the camera. There are 7 students. That was not supposed to occur, but the teacher had to include students that were arriving late one by one, and she ended up with massive groups. What are the implications for learning analytics? Well, this broke the data collection pretty much compared with a group of 4 students where it was a cleaner way to identify people. Another challenge is not necessarily coming from the unforeseen events of the classroom, but from the teachers themselves, and is that sometimes the learning design is enacted in way different ways by each teacher. So we can see that in a different kind of more like teaching script analytics or visualization. Here there are 2 teachers. T1 is a timeline. The way it enacted this classroom session, it put lots of effort in giving a good introduction and induction for the simulation. For the full 3 hours, the simulation actually happened for around 1 hour. And then it gave a lot of time for reflection, which is very important for healthcare education, apparently. And the second teacher actually gave almost 2 hours for the actual simulation. So in terms of the learning experience, I'm pretty sure that the students had totally different experience in both classrooms. When we look at events that we obtain from the logs of the mannequin, for example, these markers, the red one is about the first time a group took a basic measure of the status of the patient. And then the medication administration is the blue marker, and then an ECG to measure the impact of that medicine. And we can see all the differences on the time that the students had to experience. So this is another potential of how simple minimal analytics, or let's say visualizations, can offer some insights about the learning design or the enactment. And this brings the 5th challenge, that is about, well, if we get all this data, how to make sense of it. And this is not only how to make sense of it, but how to make it actionable. And this is our next step as well. We are trying to feed something back to either the student or the teacher, but if we feed them with a heat map of activity, in which way I actually can support reflection or understanding. And also at the same time, these physical environments of trying to bring analytics into the classroom can bring new privacy issues and in terms of data management as well. In terms of privacy, for example, is different to log data when the student is interacting with a system, with click streams, because there are other actions that are not seen by the system. But if we have this kind of sensors that can track everything, even things that are not related with the task, we are capturing maybe too much. So there are things that need to be clarified in there. And in terms of consent as well, we are very lucky to be in a university where students are very used to be recorded. Before all this project, they already had piece of paper on the wall saying that they are going to be recorded. So they use recording as part of the reflection process. So pretty much everyone provided consent without hesitation. But I don't think this is the same for all the environments. So overall, these are 6 challenges that we identified for this specific scenario. But I think we can also learn from these lessons and be prepared for other attempts to bring learning analytics into the wild, where unforeseen events can happen and we're not sure how to deal with them. At the same time, we learn about the potential, and we started to think about the feedback that we can provide to students and teachers, as well as how to provoke reflection, especially because in this context, reflection is very important. As you saw, that they give sometimes more time for reflection than for the actual activity, and also for redesign, that this can also help the teacher to redesign the activity. So this is everything for me, and a little bit of advertisement. We have PhD positions. You know about anyone interested in this kind of project or other projects, yeah, happy to talk with them. Well, thank you very much.
Roberto, we still have about 10 minutes for questions.
So when you did the temporal analysis, you broke it into quartiles. What made y'all break it into quartiles rather than looking at the different key activities as sort of timescales that change?
That's a fantastic question because exactly that's what we wanted to do, because that offers meaning to those quartiles. We attended with other quartiles, well, with other ways to divide it, like 3, 5, 6, and it's the same. There is like, how do we know that these two quartiles maybe are related or part of one? We didn't do it because the actions that are captured by the mannequin, in this case, is very low fidelity, so not everything is captured. We wanted to, for example, divide it by group when they provide medicine. We can see it actually in this one. These markers were added as a combination of what we actually automatically got, like this event. But then the medicine, it's not a marker that automatically was obtained. It was obtained by another system. It's not synchronized. But that's something that we are going to explore, exactly how to divide activity in a way that is meaningful, so we know that this block of activity belongs to why they were doing a specific task. And I think there was a paper this year where they were talking about segmentation. I don't remember where, but they call it like segmentation. How was the best way to segment your data set? And yeah, totally, like that's something we are gonna work on. Yeah. Yeah.
Really nice work. And you mentioned that some of the making sense of this data is your work, great. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts on what sort of inferences one could draw from this bird's eye view locomotion data in the different categories of the teams at different overarching patterns over there. And how would you try and combine this sort of bottom-up data-driven sort of clusters of patterns versus, I'm sure there's a lot of prior knowledge as to what is the appropriate manner of, a team gets to an emergency room and they've got a patient on a stretcher, how to suppose they actually administer medication and so forth. So how do you combine sort of pedagogy that's coming top down and theory theoretical models with some of the bottom-up data that you're getting over there?
That's, well, a very, very good question. Because now it's like we open a new box in this project, and then we started to recognize that, hey, but there is a protocol. They use algorithms. The nurses uses algorithms on the ways they need to proceed when there is an emergency. And if it's a nurse, they need to follow one algorithm. But if it is more like a specialized team of resuscitation, they have a different algorithm. So we are learning from those protocols. So that's why we are interacting with the nurses and the teachers that are teaching in this nursing school. So what we are trying to do is try to go in the middle. They don't know that much about analytics. At the beginning, they were like, well, that sounds good, that you're going to collect data, but we don't know what you're talking about. So this was a first also approach with them, for them to see, look, well, at least with this first attempt, we could collect this information, and that sparked some ideas, like the physicality, because you mentioned it. The physical information, I think, is very illustrated here at the end. In the end, so we have this kind of raw data that looks more like an infection, and then we show them these more like nicely illustrated patterns, and then they started to think about, oh well, this area maybe has some meaning, and this other area, that's why we put different colors. And then they started to think, well, yeah, but what about if you capture some other information, like information about the stress of the nurses, when there is this timeline, and you can put the timeline here. So they started to think about, hey, why don't you put this timeline of events? Because this event, as was highlighted before, made sense to have it here in the same graph, And so it has been a conversation of trying to meet in the middle. So I would say, yeah, it has been this kind of iterative approach with them. Yeah, participatory design is what we're trying to include in this case. Yeah. Ah, yeah.
Just going to ask you, did you capture the reflection and analyze the reflection? In part, the reason I'm asking is that you turn to traditional learning design theory, and learning is action and reflection, and as well as in the medical literature, a lot of the learning is not just in the simulation, but the debriefing afterwards. There's a lot of doctors and nurses, when they work together, medical errors happen not because of lack of knowledge or skills, but it's usually miscommunications, breakdown in teamwork, and that happens. You get at that when there's briefing or the reflection.
Yeah, to read here. Yeah, yeah, totally agree with that reflection part. And for nursing, it's so important that we have other project in our department to support the reflective writing, because that's crucial. And for the simulations, as you saw, it's part of the practice to have a long session for reflection. These analytics haven't been shown to the students yet, so that's why we haven't asked them. But that's our next step, is to include them, giving them some voice, including them in the design of these visualizations. Like, well, now this is not for them. The next step would be, okay, now if we want to show this to you, I don't think we need to take the decision for showing like what we need to show. So we want to include them in sessions, like design sprints with them. And in that way, we could give them voice in the design and know if that's going to give them some support in the reflection. Our overarching goal is to come back to this timeline, is to include these analytics here in real time. There are many challenges that we still need to address to do that, because systems here, the mannequin system, they don't save information in a database, for example. They save it in a particular format, like in a file, and sometimes it's a bit hard to pull it to give feedback here. But that's precisely our aim.
These are the actions of the nurses, they're the student nurses. But where are the actions? First you had, was what they were supposed to do modeled by the expert nurse first, or the instructor?
Yeah.
And so you have one there to show how she would have behaved?
No, we haven't explored that, but yeah, the teacher really expects some actions to occur in certain time. And in this scenario is one scenario that doesn't require, it's not an emergency scenario. This is a very long scenario. It's like when there's a patient there and I don't really remember the name, but it's a particular kind of scenario where the patient is there, but is not in an emergency state. So it's a bit more flexible, the process that nurses can follow. In a different kind of scenarios that we are also studying, we studied after we wrote the paper, they are shorter. They are sometimes 10 minutes scenarios where, yeah, and there's specific kind of steps that need to be followed, like an algorithm, because the mannequin is like dying, where we don't want to call it like that because it can affect. We read some literature that can affect the students, but let's say that the mannequin is dying, is in a risk situation, and then the nurses need to follow an algorithm. And what we have been finding is different study, and when you put more sensors, that sometimes nurses they start to do the CPR procedure, and there is no one holding the head of the mannequin, or they forgot to take off the glasses or the mask of oxygen, very basic things, and we can capture that and put more of these markers here. In this case, it's in a scenario that we run in a classroom where they use low fidelity mannequins. The other one is 1 by 1. It's still a classroom activity, it's just different subject. So yeah, and you mentioned it gives us more ideas as well because we didn't think about asking the teacher to do the simulation and recording. Probably that would be, I don't know if I understood well, but that gave us some ideas. So yeah.
Okay, other
Thanks.
question?
Yeah, just pause.
So just continuing a bit on Barbara's question, have you put the teacher variability in the enactment or something like that as a challenge. And I wonder if that's actually not more of an opportunity, in the sense that, I mean, once you have data like this, where you see, okay, different kind of sequences that happen different days or with different classes or with different groups, can you then exploit that, for example, to look at, okay, you know, what kind of sequence leads to better learning or stuff like that? So I don't know if you plan to doing that kind of analysis, both from the side of what the students do and from what the teacher does, or how the teacher manages the flow of activities or whatever.
Yeah. Well, we come from classroom orchestration background, so we are very interested in that. And actually, the teacher, this is the teacher that designed the class, actually. And when that teacher, we haven't done a reflection with the teacher. We just show her just the other two timelines, and she immediately chose this one as her favorite. It was informal, so I cannot report on that yet. But she said, I was not expecting what happened here. So she didn't know what the other tutor did in that area. So yeah, probably I mentioned it as a challenge because I was thinking in the simulation part, like how can we compare data collected here with data collected there? But if we rewrite the question or rethink the question as an orchestration problem, definitely I think there is also potential there, and try to maybe bridge both. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Well, that's the session. Thank you very much.
Thank you.